The late afternoon sun burned low over the dry Texas plains, casting long shadows across the worn wooden fences of the auction yard. Dust lingered in the air like an old memory. The crowd had thinned, but those who remained stood with quiet anticipation, watching a chestnut stallion tied to a solitary post. His name was Crimson Dust, a name that once stirred awe on the rodeo circuit, whispered in barroom stories and remembered in silence by those who saw him run. But now he just stood there, still, silent, broken. Around him, seasoned cowboys in sun-faded flannel shirts and sweat-stained hats lingered, uncertain. Among them stood Lucian Bloodright, arms crossed, chewing the inside of his cheek. He'd trained horses his whole life and never seen one like this. Nearby, Kayla Blackspire, the auction coordinator, glanced nervously between the silent crowd and the horse, her pen paused in midair. Even Rex Ironvale, known for buying the toughest stock without blinking, kept his wallet in his back pocket. Crimson Dust didn't thrash, didn't rear, didn't snort with wild pride. He simply stood. His eyes held no light, just a deep, quiet grief, the kind of sorrow only those who had lost too much could recognize. The bidding was supposed to start. But it didn't. Not a single voice called out. The silence grew heavier with each passing second, until the crowd seemed to forget they were there to do business. Then, from the far end of the yard, a man stepped forward. Draven Hollowgrave was known across 5 counties, not just for his skill with horses, but for the stories people whispered about him. Stories filled with loss, with ghosts, with things left unsaid. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man who carried weight in his soul. As he approached the post, even Axel Vornshade, usually unimpressed, tilted his hat back with mild curiosity. Draven said nothing. He simply reached out and placed a weathered hand on Crimson Dust's neck. The stallion flinched slightly, then exhaled. Not a nervous breath, a tired one. A sigh that spoke of old wounds, ones no saddle or stable could heal. "He's not here to be sold," Draven said quietly, his voice steady but low. "He's here to be seen." Finally, a murmur passed through the group. Seraphine Nightthorn blinked, visibly affected. Nyra Gravesoul, arms crossed behind the others, whispered something under her breath that no one caught. But everyone could feel it. Something was happening. Something real. Crimson Dust didn't move. But in that moment, everything else did. The dust hadn't even settled around Crimson Dust's hooves when the whispers began. Some thought Draven Hollowgrave was overstepping. Others just watched, unsure whether they were witnessing something sacred or something broken. The stallion remained still, but his breathing had slowed, deeper now. Draven's hand stayed on the horse's neck, unmoving, almost reverent. No one dared speak above a whisper, not even Valkyr Ashrend, who usually had something sharp to say. There was an invisible line around that post now, drawn by emotion more than action. Draven's mind wasn't at the auction yard anymore. He was back in the hills outside Amarillo, 17 years earlier. The first time he saw a colt with a red coat so fierce it looked like fire under moonlight. That colt had belonged to someone else then. A man named Mason Viral, a rancher who had once been Draven's closest friend. That friendship had ended in silence after a tragedy neither of them ever discussed again. But this horse, Crimson Dust, had been there. And now, looking into his eyes, Draven realized the horse hadn't forgotten either. Kayla Blackspire stepped forward, clipboard in hand, trying to regain control. "Draven," she said cautiously, "we still have 3 lots left today. If you're interested in bidding." "I'm not bidding," he said, his voice low but sharp. "I'm taking him home." That statement caused a stir. Lucian Bloodright exchanged glances with Axel Vornshade, who raised a skeptical brow. Kayla hesitated, then looked toward Rex Ironvale, hoping for backup, but Rex only shrugged. "Hell," he muttered, "he's got more right to that horse than any of us do. We all know that." In the shadows near the back, Nyra Gravesoul narrowed her eyes. She knew enough about Draven's past to sense that this wasn't just about a horse. There were old wounds reopening, wounds that had never healed right. And though she wouldn't say it aloud, part of her respected him for stepping into them. Still, something about this moment felt unfinished, like a door had been cracked open, but what lay behind it wasn't ready to be seen. Crimson Dust finally moved. Just slightly. His ears twitched, his head dipped closer to Draven's chest. It was a quiet gesture, but it felt like thunder in the silence. The others began to back away, almost instinctively. Seraphine Nightthorn watched with her arms folded tight across her chest, her expression unreadable. Draven kept his eyes on the horse, but his voice was distant, like he was speaking more to himself than anyone else. "There's a reason he came back," he said. "And I think I know what it is." Draven led Crimson Dust slowly out of the auction ring, the crowd parting as if pushed by an invisible force. The horse didn't resist. His steps were cautious, but deliberate, as though he finally recognized the presence of someone who saw more than muscle and pedigree. Behind them, whispers flared up again, this time sharper. Lucian Bloodright frowned, arms crossed tighter. "You think that horse just showed up here for nothing," he muttered. "There's history here, and it ain't clean." Kayla Blackspire followed a few steps behind, clipboard lowered, her usual confidence shaken. She'd worked dozens of auctions over the years and never seen anything like this. "Draven," she called out, "you can't just take him. There's paperwork, liability," but her voice trailed off. Deep down, she knew this was bigger than rules or forms. That horse didn't belong to the auction. He belonged to whatever story Draven had left buried for nearly 2 decades. They reached the edge of the pens, where the last rays of sunlight painted everything in burnt gold. Draven stopped and looked at Crimson Dust. "You remember, don't you?" he whispered. The horse blinked slowly, almost in answer. "Back at Hollow Ridge. Before the fire." His words hung in the air like smoke. That name, Hollow Ridge, hit like a cold wind. From behind the fence, Axel Vornshade straightened, startled. "Did he say Hollow Ridge?" he asked. Seraphine Nightthorn looked over, clearly rattled. Everyone in the region knew that name. It wasn't just a place. It was a scar. A fire had torn through the Hollow Ridge ranch 17 years ago. Mason Viral had died in it. His horses scattered. His legacy reduced to ash. But no one ever spoke of it, not publicly. Especially not Draven. Crimson Dust pawed the dirt, ears twitching. The name had stirred something in him too. He'd been there. He'd survived. Maybe the only one who had. And now, standing beside Draven once more, it was like the pieces of a long-buried truth were beginning to pull themselves back together. Nyra Gravesoul had stepped closer without realizing it. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "Why now, Draven? After all these years?" Draven didn't answer right away. He kept his eyes on Crimson Dust, jaw clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice was hoarse. "Because someone brought him back on purpose. And whoever did, wants me to remember." That night, the wind picked up. Dust swirled across the empty lots of the auction grounds, and most of the cowboys had already left. But Draven Hollowgrave hadn't. He sat alone near the temporary stall Kayla had arranged for Crimson Dust. A single light bulb swung from a hook above, casting a pale glow over the stallion's red coat. The horse was finally resting, his breath slow and steady, but Draven's wasn't. He hadn't slept in days. Not really. And tonight, memories felt louder than the wind. He ran a hand over his face and leaned against the fence. Hollow Ridge. Just hearing the name again had shaken something loose inside him. He hadn't been back since the fire. Since the night Mason Viral died and Draven's world cracked open. Mason had been more than a friend. He'd been like a brother. And Draven had failed him. Failed his horses. Failed everyone. He never forgave himself, but he learned to forget. Or so he thought. Footsteps crunched through the gravel behind him. It was Valkyr Ashrend, chewing a toothpick, eyes locked on the stall. "I don't believe in signs," he said flatly. "But a horse disappearing for 17 years and showing up at your feet? That ain't just luck." Draven didn't look at him. "Someone brought him here," he said. "Someone who knows exactly what happened that night. Maybe even someone who was there." Valkyr raised an eyebrow. "You think this is about revenge?" "I think," Draven muttered, "it's about unfinished business." Back inside the main barn, Nyra Gravesoul and Kayla Blackspire sat across from each other at a wooden table, the auction paperwork untouched between them. "He's not lying," Nyra said. "That horse, he carries something. It's not just trauma. It's memory." Kayla shook her head. "And memory's dangerous, especially in the wrong hands." Meanwhile, out near the pickup trucks, Rex Ironvale and Lucian Bloodright talked in low tones. "This is turning into a mess," Lucian said. "We should have never let that horse walk out." Rex looked toward the barn. "Too late. The fuse is lit. Now we just wait to see what burns." Back at the stall, Crimson Dust stirred. He raised his head slowly and stared into the darkness. Draven followed his gaze, but saw nothing. Still, the chill that crept up his spine told him something, or someone, was watching. And in that quiet space between breath and instinct, Draven knew, this wasn't just about the past coming back. It was about someone making sure he couldn't escape it. The following morning arrived with a heaviness in the air that no sunrise could lift. Draven woke in the front seat of his truck, eyes dry, back stiff, and his mind buzzing with questions. Crimson Dust stood quietly in the makeshift stall nearby, watching him. There was a strange awareness in the horse's eyes now, not fear, but readiness. Like he knew something was coming too. Draven climbed out of the cab slowly, trying to shake the fog of unease that clung to him like the morning dew. On the windshield, beneath the wiper blade, was an envelope. No stamp. No address. Just one name written in jagged black ink, Draven Hollowgrave. He pulled it free and stared at it for a moment, his chest tightening. He hadn't told anyone he was staying the night, and no one should have known where to find him. His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. Inside was a folded piece of yellowed paper. It smelled faintly of smoke. There were only 2 lines inside. "You left him to burn." Crimson Dust came back. "I will too." Draven read the note 3 times, his jaw clenched tighter with each pass. He looked around. The auction grounds were mostly empty now. A few early workers. Some cattle being loaded. No sign of who had left the message. But someone was watching. He could feel it in his bones. He took the letter straight to Nyra Gravesoul, who was sipping black coffee behind the barn. She read it silently, her expression unreadable. "You think this is from Mason's family?" she asked finally. "No one from Mason's family survived the fire," Draven said. "At least, that's what I was told." Nyra raised an eyebrow. "Then someone lied. Or someone survived. And they've been waiting." Back near the arena, Lucian Bloodright and Valkyr Ashrend noticed the tension building. "What's going on?" Lucian asked as Draven passed. "You look like you saw a ghost." Draven didn't slow down. "I think I did." Later that afternoon, Crimson Dust began acting strange, pacing, snorting, ears pinned back. He kept turning toward the tree line beyond the arena as if he could sense something approaching. Draven followed his gaze, but again saw nothing. Still, the unease grew heavier. That night, he stood outside the stall long after everyone else had gone. Somewhere out there, someone was waiting. And they wanted more than answers. They wanted justice or revenge. And whatever it was coming for both of them. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills when Kayla Blackspire spotted the truck. It wasn't from the auction grounds. Rusted, silent, and coated in red dirt like it had just rolled out of another century, it pulled up near the fence line without warning. No one climbed out. Just a shadow sitting behind the wheel, unmoving. She squinted toward it, uneasy. Something about that truck felt wrong. Out of place. Like it didn't belong anywhere, except in a nightmare someone tried to forget. Draven had been sitting with Crimson Dust again, brushing the horse's coat with slow, steady strokes, when Kayla approached. "You expecting anyone?" she asked, voice low. Draven looked up, followed her gaze to the old truck. His shoulders tensed. No headlights. No engine. Just silence and a shadow. But Crimson Dust noticed it too. His body stiffened. He let out a sharp snort, eyes fixed on the vehicle. He remembered. Draven stood and walked toward the fence, boots crunching over dry gravel. Kayla kept a few steps behind. "Do you recognize the truck?" she asked. He didn't answer. But deep down he did. The shape, the dents, even the dull metal of the grill, it all stirred something in his memory. "That used to belong to Mason Viril," he muttered. "But it burned in the fire." His voice was dry, like he didn't believe his own words. The truck hadn't moved. But its presence screamed louder than any sound. Back at the stables, Valkyr Ashrend and Nyra Gravesoul had joined Lucian. All three watched as Draven crossed the open dirt toward the vehicle. "This is it," Valkyr said. "This is what's been creeping in the shadows." Nyra's eyes didn't leave Draven's figure. "He's not just walking toward a truck," she whispered. "He's walking back into a fire." As Draven approached, the truck's driver door creaked open. Slowly, a single boot stepped out, old, cracked leather. Then a figure emerged, coat long, hat pulled low, face hidden in shadow. But even from a distance, Draven could feel it, the weight of familiarity, of buried guilt clawing its way back to the surface. "Draven Hollowgrave," the voice rasped, low and broken. "Thought you could outrun ghosts?" Crimson Dust neighed violently from the stable, slamming his hooves against the wood. And in that instant, Draven knew, this wasn't a ghost from the past. It was someone who had survived the fire, and came back to finish what it started. The man stepped closer, his boots dragging through the gravel like echoes from another lifetime. The wind tugged at his long coat, revealing a tattered shirt underneath, scorched at the sleeves. Draven stood still, eyes locked on the figure. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from recognition. There was something in the way the man moved, slightly hunched, favoring one leg, that pulled a long-buried memory out of the ashes. "You survived," Draven said, the words barely escaping his throat. The man tipped up his hat, just enough for the dying sunlight to touch his face. Burn scars traced across his jawline, and one eye was clouded with damage. But the other eye burned with a fire that had never gone out. "You left me there, Draven. You ran. You saved the horse, not me. Silas Viril, Mason's younger brother. The one everyone assumed had died in the fire. But he hadn't. He had lived, disfigured, forgotten, swallowed by smoke and silence. And now he was standing in front of Draven, alive, bitter, and carrying 17 years of rage. Draven staggered back a step. "You were never supposed to be there. Mason told me you were out in town." "Mason was wrong," Silas snapped. "You never checked. You grabbed the colt, jumped the fence, and left us. I was inside, screaming for help while the roof collapsed. And now here we are, full circle." In the distance, Crimson Dust paced violently in his stall, sensing the storm rising. Nyra, Valkyr, and Kayla were all watching from behind the arena gates, frozen in disbelief. Lucian Bloodright reached for the revolver on his belt but held back. Not yet. Not until he understood exactly what this was. "I didn't know," Draven whispered. "If I had seen you—" "But you didn't," Silas interrupted, voice hollow. "And now you want to act like a hero again? You want redemption? That horse may forgive you. But I don't." Silas took a step forward. His shadow stretched long under the crimson sky, creeping toward Draven like the smoke of Hollow Ridge once did. "I didn't come back for peace," he said. "I came to take back what the fire didn't finish." In that moment, the wind shifted. Dust rose like a warning. And deep inside, Draven realized this wasn't about guilt anymore. This was about payback. And Silas had waited half a lifetime to deliver it. Silas moved with the fury of a man who had rehearsed this moment for years. His hand went to his coat, and for a second Draven thought he was reaching for a weapon. But instead he pulled out something worse, a scorched leather bridle. "Recognize this?" he growled. "It was Mason's. I pulled it out of the rubble. Thought I was holding his legacy. Turns out I was holding his grave." Draven's chest tightened. The smell of smoke seemed to fill his lungs all over again. He took a slow step forward, palms out. "I never wanted any of this, Silas. I stayed away because I didn't know how to face it. I carried it with me every damn day." Behind them, Nyra Gravesoul finally moved, stepping between the fence rails. "Silas, don't do this. Whatever happened back then, this isn't justice. It's pain talking." But Silas didn't hear her. Or maybe he just didn't care. The years had hardened his heart into something sharp and dangerous. Crimson Dust let out a sudden, piercing scream. His hooves slammed against the stall as if he were trying to break free. His muscles trembled, eyes wide with panic, not fear of Silas, but memory. The same scent of fire, the same tension in the air. He remembered the flames, the screams, the moment he and Draven had escaped. Barely. Silas turned toward the stall, eyes narrowing. "That horse got the life I was supposed to have," he spat. "He was saved. I was left to rot." He took another step. Too close. Draven lunged. The two men collided like thunder. Dust flew up around them as fists were thrown, years of guilt and grief erupting in raw violence. Kayla shouted for someone to stop it. Valkyr ran in, pulling Draven back while Lucian grabbed Silas by the collar and yanked him away, teeth bared. "That's enough," Lucian roared. Breathing hard, Silas wiped blood from his mouth, eyes wild. "This isn't over, Hollowgrave. You owe more than words." He turned and walked toward the rusted truck, limping but unshaken. As the engine roared to life, Crimson Dust reared in his stall, kicking the gate so hard it splintered. Draven stood motionless, blood on his knuckles, dust in his lungs, heart pounding with a mixture of rage, sorrow, and fear. Around him, the others remained silent. No one had seen it coming, but now none of them could look away. The fire was back. And this time, it wouldn't leave survivors. The sun had long since set, but no one had left the grounds. The silence after Silas's departure was thick, like the air before a storm. Crimson Dust stood near the broken gate of his stall, breathing heavily, sweat glistening on his coat. His eyes darted toward the dirt road where Silas had vanished, like he was still watching, still waiting. Draven leaned against a post, hands bleeding, heart heavier than it had ever been. Kayla stitched his knuckles quietly, not asking questions. But her eyes held the same weight as everyone else's, confusion, fear, and something else. Maybe pity. Maybe awe. "You should tell them," she said finally. "The truth. All of it." Draven didn't answer. Not yet. Not until he was sure they could handle it, or that he could. Inside the barn, Naira and Valker argued in hushed tones. "He's not the same Silas," Naira said. "You saw it. That man's carrying more than scars." Valker didn't disagree. "But what are we supposed to do? Just wait for him to come back and burn it all down?" Lucian, standing nearby with arms crossed, added, "He's not finished. And neither is this." Draven finally walked to the center of the barn and stood in front of them all. His voice, when it came, was rough but steady. "The fire at Hollow Ridge, it wasn't an accident." The words hit like a stone in water. Mason found out something he wasn't supposed to. He was going to sell the land. Walk away from everything. Someone didn't want that. "What are you saying?" Naira asked, her voice sharp. "I'm saying," Draven said, "that Silas wasn't the only one in that house. Someone else lit that fire. Someone who knew Mason's secrets. And I think Silas found out who." He glanced toward the stall. "That's why he brought Crimson Dust back. As a warning. As bait. To finish what was started." Crimson Dust let out a low, guttural sound, ears pinned back. He kicked at the last sliver of his stall gate, and it gave way. Slowly, deliberately, the stallion walked into the barn, stopping right next to Draven. His presence was a message in itself. "He wants to lead us," Kayla whispered. "He remembers more than we do." Draven looked at the others. "If we don't find Silas first, he'll burn everything. Not just me. All of us." And with Crimson Dust at his side, Draven Hollowgrave walked into the dark, toward the truth. They found Silas at the old Hollow Ridge property just before dawn. The ruins were still there, blackened beams, cracked foundations, and the faint outline of what used to be a home. Time had left it behind, just like everyone else. But Silas hadn't. His truck was parked crooked along the overgrown path, door hanging open. He was standing by what remained of the barn, staring at the ashes like they still held warmth. Crimson Dust approached first. His hooves moved slowly over the earth, but his posture was different now, not tense, not afraid. "Come." As if this was where he was always meant to return. Silas turned when he heard the sound and let out a bitter laugh. "He came back," he muttered. "Of course he did. That horse always had more heart than any of us." Draven stepped out of the trees, boots heavy with dew, eyes locked on Silas. "We're not here to fight," he said. "We're here to end this." Silas didn't move, didn't reach for anything. The fire inside him had burned for 17 years, but now, in the face of everything, it flickered low. "I wanted you to feel it," he said. "The weight. The loss. But now I see. You've been carrying it longer than I thought." There was silence, thick with memory. Then Draven spoke. "I didn't save Crimson Dust because he was just a horse. I saved him because he was the only thing I could save. And I've lived with that ever since." He paused. "But I'm done running. If you want to bury me in these ashes, do it. Or you can come back with me. You don't have to burn with this place." Silas looked down at his hands. The scars. The dirt. The years. And for the first time, his face broke. He dropped to his knees beside the ruins, hands trembling. Crimson Dust stepped closer, lowering his head near Silas's shoulder, a gesture of quiet forgiveness. And something broke in Silas then. Not violently. Gently. Like a door finally opening. They didn't speak much on the drive back. But the fire was over. Weeks later, Draven rebuilt part of the auction stables with Silas helping in silence. Crimson Dust remained at his side every day, no longer a relic of the past, but a symbol of what could survive it. In the end, it wasn't fire or revenge that finished the story. It was memory, forgiveness, and the choice to finally let go.